Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I'm going to bring you my February wrap-up. As I have said in my Shelfbuster announcement video, February has been a little bit of a crazy month. A lot of adulting has happened. I have moved house, I have picked a wedding venue, I have been on holiday, I have bought a house, which happened before moving, just FYI, and it's been a lot. It's been a lot. Regardless of that, I actually managed to read 7 books this month, which I think is really impressive and is about average for me, so very proud of myself. I'm just gonna go ahead and dive right in. The very first book that I read this month was The Diviners by Libba Bray. So this is a very popular book. It's the first in a series, and I think that a lot of people will have heard of it. I think it came out in 2012, and I remember it being on my radar then, but I just never got around to it until now. So The Diviners is set in 1920s New York, and it features a heroine named Evie, and she is the daughter of 2 members of the temperance movement who were in favor of prohibition, which is the ban of alcohol that happened in the 20s, which was a terrible idea in America. And she is very much a modern woman. She is very much a flapper, she drinks, she parties, and she does something. And that is the last straw for her parents. And so her parents, for some reason, decide to send this party girl to New York City. That's the one thing about this that I really don't get, is why they sent her to New York City, but that's okay. So she ends up living with her uncle in New York, in Manhattan, and he runs this sort of supernatural museum, and he is a consultant for the police for when weird things start to happen. So there's a murder, and it's a very kind of supernatural occult type murder, and Evie and the very large cast of characters are trying to figure out what's going on. So I had really high hopes for The Diviners, and I think that for the most part they were met. I really enjoyed reading this book. However, I feel like it had so much potential that it just didn't achieve. I ended up giving it, I think, like 3.5 stars. It was really fun. It's the most fun I've had reading in a long time. I tore through this. This is like, what, this is like 600 pages long? Yeah, this book is almost 600 pages long, and I tore through it in a few days. But there's so much that could have been better. And I feel like everything from sort of the massive cast of characters, where you don't really get to know anyone except Evie really well, to the villain, who I thought was kind of lame, which really sucks. I felt like there was a lot that could have happened in this book that could have been a lot better, as I said. So I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. This seems to be a really divisive review. People seem to completely disagree with me or completely agree with me. So the next book that I read this month is actually one that I picked up while on holiday in Edinburgh, and it's something that's a little bit out of my comfort zone. It's a book that I have known about for a very long time, and I've recognized the cover, I've seen it everywhere, it was made into a movie, it's a huge deal, and I just never got around to reading it, so I picked it up. It was cheaper than most graphic novels, which is kind of the barrier of entry for me, because graphic novels are so expensive and they're not very long, they take a really short time to read, so for me the return on investment just isn't good, but I decided to pick this up, and I'm really glad that I did, and that is Persepolis, and this is by Marjane Satrapi. So this book, if you don't know, it might look familiar to you. It's probably something that you've seen before. It has very distinctive artwork. This book is about her life. It's a memoir. She grew up in Iran in the 80s, which, if you know a bit about modern history, that was not a great time necessarily to grow up in Iran. There's lots of violence, a huge regime change, and that is when sort of a lot of the strict religious laws that we know of today came into place. What she does is, it is the story of a childhood and the story of a return, as you may be able to see on the cover, and what she does is she splits this story in 2. So it's her as a child, the story of her childhood, growing up as all of this is going on. Then her parents send her away as a teenager, and that is the story of the return. So it's her while she's away, she lives in Europe for a while, and then she comes back to Iran. I really like this book, and as an American, and as some of you may know, American history classes tend to focus very much on the American and not necessarily world history. At least that was my experience, and it seems to be the experience of a lot of people I know. A lot of this I didn't know about. I had Google open and I was looking things up as I was reading the book, and I feel like I feel like it really expanded my worldview a lot. It's fascinating. It really is, because she is very honest about a lot of the experiences that she had. She made some poor choices as an adult. There's one particular part that I feel like a lot of reviewers bring up when they talk about this book that makes people really uncomfortable. She is going to get in trouble with sort of the religious, not police, but the people who sort of patrol the streets. She's about to get in trouble with them, and she makes a choice to sort of put blame on someone else and distract from what she's doing. And it's not good. It's actually a really horrible thing that she does, and I feel like people really focus on that, and the fact that she included this in her memoir, something that she didn't need to, I feel was a very, very brave and bold choice, and I really appreciated that. So even though there are some parts of this that are very uncomfortable, like that particular moment, I thought that this was a fantastic book. It's a very brave book. It is a story that'll really inspire you, I think, and I highly, highly encourage you to pick this up, even if memoirs or modern history or Middle Eastern history or graphic novels are not to your taste. I think that this would be a fantastic book for you to try if you're looking to read something a little bit different. So next up we have a book that has sort of set the UK blogging world aflutter. So this is one that I actually was not sent by a publisher like a lot of people have been. This is one that I spotted in a bookstore actually when I bought Persepolis, and that is Scythe. This is by Neil Shusterman. So Scythe is a young adult dystopian novel, and it's not about sort of the horrible, horrible things that you usually see in dystopian novels. It actually features a human society in which we have conquered disease. We have conquered death. People do not die naturally anymore. So in order to control the population, there are these people called scythes, and they kill people off. And every scythe has a different way of doing things. There's a whole collective of scythes, and they're sort of self-governing, and it's a really, really fascinating world. We follow the two teenage characters, Citra and Rowan, as they are apprenticed by a scythe named Faraday. So every scythe picks their name from an important person in history. So Scythe Faraday is training them, and things happen, and I won't say any more than that. This is a really fascinating book. I enjoyed it. I think I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars though, and that is because I thought the beginning was fantastic, I thought it was really interesting, and I thought the end was really good. I thought the end was fantastic, but all of the middle bits were so boring, which is shocking to me because it's all about like learning how to kill people and learning martial arts and learning about weaponry. That sounds really interesting. It is really interesting. But the training, man, it goes on forever, and it should be so fascinating, but to me it just dragged so much. My other big problem with this book is I really didn't like Citra and Rowan. I thought they were both incredibly boring people. She is kind of the sort of smart, brainy Hermione Granger-esque character, and Rowan is more of the very, very reluctant, doesn't really want to do this but is kind of forced into it, as they both have, but him a little bit more so. And I didn't feel anything for either of them. I did, however, really like Scythe Faraday, and I really like Scythe Curie, who comes in later. So yeah, there are good parts and bad parts of this, but I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5. I was a little bit disappointed, but I think that, as far as I can tell, everyone else is loving this book. So don't let my rating deter you if you are interested in this, because a lot of people are really, really loving it. So next up is the book that was featured in the January Fairy Loot Box. That is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So to preface this, and I am going to do a full review of this book, so if you want to hear more, I'm going to keep this short, but I hate fairies. I hate the fae. I think they're so boring and they're laughable because they're never really that threatening, and they are silly, silly creatures. I don't care how badass and scary you try to make them, the fae are silly. And so I thought that if there's going to be any book that got me to like the fae, although to be fair I've only read 2 fae books, it would be The Cruel Prince, because Holly Black is known as sort of the queen of the fae, as it were. I actually did end up liking this, which was a little bit of a surprise for me. It's funny because this book is a bit of a mess. There's a lot that I acknowledge is not right about this book, sort of the way that the plot goes and the narrative goes and all that. I feel like it could have had a few more rounds of editing, perhaps. I feel like some of the motivations of the characters were off and all of that good stuff, but I enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. I got completely sucked in. It's interesting because it combines the modern world, our modern world, with sort of the Fae Kingdom. I can't say that without laughing. I know that was something that a lot of people didn't like, but I actually found it really interesting because it added this element to the story that I have not seen before, and maybe other people have done this, but I have not read a lot of Fae books because I don't enjoy them, but I really ended up liking that aspect of this book. So what The Cruel Prince is actually about, because I never explained that, is it follows the character named Jude, and when she is a child, her parents are murdered by her mother's ex-husband, who is a Fae. So he takes Vivi, who is actually his daughter, who is half Fae, and Taryn, who is Jude's twin sister, and Jude herself, to be raised in the land of Fae, as one does, because he feels this kind of sense of honor towards them, which is very nice. So basically, they grow up in Fae as mortals, which is incredibly dangerous, and they never quite fit in. All Jude wants is to fit in, and it all gets complicated from there. I'm not going to explain much more because spoilers. But I ended up actually really liking this book. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it's not perfect. It's nowhere near perfect, but I really, really enjoyed it. So next up is actually one of the single best books that I have read all year so far, and I realize it's only February, but seriously, this book was absolutely amazing. So I read Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It would be really, really difficult for me to try to explain what this book is about, because it's complicated. Just the scope of this book is absolutely astonishing. So I will do my best, but basically it's a dual narrative. It's mankind. Earth is dying, as it always seems to be, and there is an ARC ship that is carrying 200,000 human beings away from the dying Earth to try to find a new planet to inhabit. They find a new planet that they can inhabit, which actually has been terraformed by humans 2,000 years earlier, and due to an experiment that went terribly, terribly wrong, they face some trouble because of this planet. So the other side of the narrative is, again, because things went terribly, terribly wrong, a nanovirus was released onto the surface of this planet that ended up forcing the spider inhabitants of the planet to evolve to this incredible level. So, it's just absolutely, absolutely incredible. This is adult sci-fi. This is like hardcore sci-fi. So if you are not necessarily an experienced sci-fi reader, I wouldn't recommend this. But if you like sci-fi and you want, not necessarily a challenge, but you want to read something that is like the most ambitious thing that you can possibly imagine in sci-fi, this is an amazing book to try out. I wouldn't recommend this book if you don't like spiders. I don't know if that's come across or not, but there's a lot of spiders in this book. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I'm so, so, so happy I read it, and I actually ended up reading the audiobook, which is incredible. It has an amazing narrator, and she is really, really good at sort of having very, very distinct voices and accents for the different people, so it's not hard to follow at all. Again, we have sci-fi coming up next, and this is actually the first and the only book that I read off of Scottish Fiancé's TBR. I will explain how my TBR went so disastrously bad later on, but I didn't read much of what he wanted me to read. Sorry. Did end up picking up Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein. So this book bears very little resemblance to the movie, which I knew going in, and I'm really glad that I did. I feel like that helped me out a little bit. So Starship Troopers is told in the first person, and our main character is Juan Rico, and he is a member of the Mobile Infantry, so he is basically Space Army. If you see the movie, you see a lot of action. You see him fighting the aliens and these horrible bug things and lots of, you know, hoorah and all of that great, great military stuff, but that's not really what you get in this book. Instead, you get his military career. You get his... We spend a lot of time in basic training. You really, really see sort of how the military is structured. You see how he gets trained up to actually do all the fighting. There's sort of in the background, there's this war going on that mankind is kind of losing. But that's not really, I don't think, the focus of the book in the way that it is the focus of the film. So the thing about this book that I wasn't a huge fan of, which I expected going in, because I have actually tried to read Stranger in a Strange Land, which is another book by him, and I wasn't, for many reasons, for another video, I was not into that book. However, the thing that I didn't enjoy about this is he sort of beats you over the head with his philosophy and his political ideas, and it's very sort of lofty, and he is right and everyone else is wrong, because everyone in the century is wrong, and that's how we have criminals and juvenile delinquents and all of that good stuff. So there are a lot of moments in this book where Johnny will go and sort of flash back to his philosophy class that he took in high school, and oh god, it's like 20 pages of why we should beat children. It's really like, okay. I did not particularly enjoy that, and it's funny because this is not a very long book. This is, what, less than 300 pages? And I would say maybe a third of it is him talking about his philosophy and why the military is great and why we're all gonna fail as a species. Which is cool, but it was a bit much. I think I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. I actually did really enjoy reading it, but it was a little bit beating you over the head with his ideas. It happens. So the very last book that I read this month is one that I just finished yesterday, actually, as of the filming of this video, and that is The Sacrifice Box. This is by Martin Stewart. I picked this up at YALC, which is the big young adult literature convention that happens here in the UK in July. So I got this last year, and I never ended up picking it up. I kind of forgot about it for a while, and then I started to hear a little bit more. It actually came out in January of this year. Started to hear a little bit more, started to hear some reviews, and I heard that it was a lot like Stranger Things, which I love. I watch like no TV, but I watch Stranger Things. And as an added bonus, the author was actually doing an event in my brand new hometown that I just moved to a week before. So I ended up picking up this book so I could have it at least partially read for the event, which I did, and I ended up really enjoying it. I really liked it, and I'm really happy I picked this up. So The Sacrifice Box is set on a small British island, and sort of this, it feels very much like a holiday town. So it features a group of friends. It's 2 girls and 3 boys, and one summer, this is very kind of reminiscent, one summer, it's 1982, they find this stone box in the forest, and sort of idea comes to them to put things that mean something to them in the box. They make a sacrifice to the box. However, there are 3 rules of the box, which you can see on the cover here. So it is never come to the box alone, never open it after dark, and never take back your sacrifice. So they make the sacrifice to swear to be friends forever. It's this one amazing summer where these kids all come together because their usual friends are away on holiday or whatever. They have this great summer, and then they go back to their lives. They go back to their friend groups, and we sort of jump back into the story 4 years later in 1986. These 5 friends come back together because they realize someone has broken the rules of the sacrifice box, and bad things are happening because of it, and it starts to escalate and get worse and worse. So I really ended up enjoying this book. I thought it was really interesting, and I do think that having seen the author in an event and hearing him talk about it a little bit helped a lot. I think that it would be very easy to just say, well, this is just a ripoff of Stranger Things, but he actually wrote it before the first season of Stranger Things even premiered. It fits in really well with Stranger Things without being exactly the same thing. It has that same sort of wonderful childhood nostalgia of your group of friends in this great summer, and it also has all of the sci-fi horror awfulness that's happening as well. One thing that I will say about The Sacrifice Box is that it is incredibly gory. It's very gory, and I wouldn't say that it's not like appropriate for young adults, even though it's a young adult book. Young adults can handle this kind of thing, but if you are someone who does not like gore, maybe stay away from this one. I personally don't really enjoy gore, but I have less of a problem reading it than seeing it, so I sort of skimmed over some of the passages and ended up being just fine. And also, just as a heads up, there's no animal mutilation in this book. However, there are mutilated animals, so if you're wondering what that means, you never see the act of someone mutilating an animal. However, they come across a lot of sort of happy woodland creatures who are in bad shape, shall we say, throughout the course of this book, and you get kind of graphic descriptions of bad things bad things happening, things attacking, and just if you don't like that kind of thing, maybe stay away from this one. So I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I ended up really enjoying it. It's a super fast read, and I would highly recommend this. Even though it came out in January, I would really recommend this as a summer read because it has that sort of that real summer feel. It takes place in summer, and it's a really quick beachy read. So that is it for my February wrap up. So I'm going to be doing my February book haul coming up next, and there are a lot of books to haul, so definitely make sure you tune in for that. If you have read any of these books, if you want to read any of these books, if you're curious about any of these books, then definitely let me know. I would love to chat. That's it for today, and I will see you next time.